John Steinbeck, men who made the pen mightier than the sharp sword. The FBI tracked him for 40 years. His book was burned in public. He won the highly coveted Nobel Prize. He paid dearly for his guts, courtesy the people and FBI, but his books sold over 100 million copies. Find out who his work centered on. This is exactly what happens when you write the truth, and only the truth. His name was John Steinbeck. He understood something dangerous, that the greatest threat to power is that individual who actually listens to the powerless. The book they tried to destroy. April 14, 1939. Salinas, California, Steinbeck's hometown. A crowd gathered in the town square. They'd brought copies of a new novel, not to read or discuss, but to burn. The book was The Grapes of Wrath, published just days earlier. The author was John Steinbeck, a local son who'd betrayed them, or so they believed. They piled the books in the square and set them on fire. Watching the pages curl and blacken, they thought they were protecting their community's reputation. They were actually proving Steinbeck right. What he'd done. In the mid-1930s, California's agricultural valleys were filled with desperate families. Akis, fleeing the Dust Bowl, arriving in California hoping for work, finding exploitation instead. They lived in squalid camps, picked fruit for starvation wages, watched their children go hungry, faced violence from landowners when they tried to organize. Most Americans didn't know, or didn't care, or believed these migrants got what they deserved. John Steinbeck decided to find out the truth. He didn't just interview migrants from a distance. He lived among them. He dressed in worn clothes, stayed in their camps, picked crops alongside them, listened to their stories. He saw children with distended bellies from malnutrition, families living in conditions that would shock most Americans, workers cheated out of promised wages. Violence used to keep people desperate and compliant, and he wrote it all down. The Grapes of Wrath told the story of the Joad family, Oklahoma farmers driven from their land by drought and banks, traveling to California seeking work, finding instead a system designed to exploit their desperation. It was fiction, but every detail came from real experiences Steinbeck had witnessed. The novel was brutal, honest, and enraging. If you were the kind of person who preferred poverty stay invisible. The Fury. When The Grapes of Wrath was published in April 1939, the response was immediate and violent. California's agricultural interests were apoplectic. The Associated Farmers of California denounced it as communist propaganda. Landowners called it lies. Politicians demanded it be banned. Libraries across California refused to stock it. Kern County banned it entirely. Other counties followed. In Steinbeck's hometown of Salinas, they burned it in the town square. The book was banned in Ireland, burned in Nazi Germany, and denounced from pulpits. Across America, Steinbeck received death threats. His family faced harassment. But something else happened too. The book became a massive bestseller, selling 430,000 copies in a year, winning the Pulitzer Prize in 1940, forcing Americans to confront a reality their government and businesses wanted hidden. Eleanor Roosevelt defended it. Migrant advocacy groups distributed it. It became impossible to ignore. It was a battle royale. Each side went aggressive with one result recorded. The book gained popularity, so also the writer, and the FBI opened a file on John Steinbeck. The surveillance. For over 40 years, the FBI kept John Steinbeck under surveillance. They monitored his activities, read his mail, tracked his associations, built a file that eventually exceeded 300 pages. Why? Because Steinbeck wrote about poverty, labor rights, and economic injustice. Because he portrayed migrants and workers sympathetically. Because his books questioned American capitalism's fundamental fairness. In the 1940s and 1950s, during the Red Scare and McCarthyism, this made him dangerous. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover personally authorized continued surveillance. Informants reported on Steinbeck's speeches. Agents documented his friendships with suspected leftists. They never found evidence he was a communist, because he wasn't. He was just a writer who believed ordinary people's struggles mattered, who thought poverty was a policy choice, not a moral failing, who documented what he saw with uncomfortable honesty. That was threatening enough. His writings had hard, invisible punches. Who he was. John Ernst Steinbeck was born February 27, 1902, in Salinas, California, the agricultural valley he'd later make famous. His father was a treasurer. His mother was a schoolteacher. They were middle class, comfortable, secure. Steinbeck could have lived that same comfortable life, writing pleasant stories about pleasant people. Instead, he spent his 20s working odd jobs: ranch hand, fruit picker, construction worker, surveyor. He was trying to be a writer, but he was also learning how working people actually lived. His breakthrough came with Tortilla Flat, 1935, a sympathetic portrait of Mexican Americans in Monterey. It was a masterpiece. Then came Dubious Battle, 1936, about striking fruit pickers. Then Of Mice and Men, 1937, about itinerant farm workers. Each book moved closer to the margins of American society. Each showed more clearly that Steinbeck's sympathies lay with people the system discarded. Then came The Grapes of Wrath, and everything exploded. It was an adventure of consistency. 3 books in 3 years, 1 apiece. The defense: when his hometown burned his book, when agricultural interests called for his head, when the FBI opened their file, Steinbeck didn't retreat. He wrote more. The Grapes of Wrath was followed by Cannery Row, 1945, returning to working-class Monterey. East of Eden, 1952, his most ambitious novel, exploring good and evil through California's agricultural history. He became a war correspondent during World War II, not covering generals and strategy, but soldiers' experiences, ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. He kept writing about the forgotten, the exploited, the marginalized, and slowly, painfully, the country caught up to him. The vindication. By the 1960s, The Grapes of Wrath was being taught in schools, including in California, where it had been burned 20 years earlier. What a reverse order. The Okies Steinbeck wrote about were now respected citizens, their children and grandchildren integrated into California society. The exploitation Steinbeck documented was now acknowledged as historical fact. The book that had been called communist propaganda was now called an American classic. In 1962, John Steinbeck was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. The Nobel Committee cited his realistic and imaginative writing, combining as it does sympathetic humor and keen social perception. Translation: he told the truth about how ordinary people lived, and he'd done it with compassion and artistry. He was 60 years old. He'd spent 4 decades writing about people society wanted invisible. He'd been surveilled, threatened, banned, and burned in effigy. And now he had literature's highest honor. The cost, but the vindication came with shadows. Steinbeck struggled with depression in his later years. His 3 marriages all failed. His relationship with his sons was troubled. Fame and criticism had worn him down. He'd made enemies. The FBI never stopped watching him. Conservative critics never forgave him for The Grapes of Wrath. In 1968, at age 66, John Steinbeck died of heart disease in New York City. The FBI file remained open. The legacy. Today, John Steinbeck's books have sold over 100 million copies worldwide. The Grapes of Wrath is taught in high schools and universities as essential American literature. The book they burned in town squares is now required reading. That's not just vindication, that's transformation. The question: John Steinbeck spent his career asking one question: who gets to tell stories about the poor? The powerful wanted to tell those stories, or better, not tell them at all, keep poverty invisible, suffering unspoken, exploitation unexamined. Steinbeck said, "No, I'll go live with them. I'll listen to them. I'll write what I see, not what's convenient." And for that, they tracked him for 40 years, burned his books, called him a traitor. But they couldn't stop the books from being read, couldn't prevent The Grapes of Wrath from changing how America saw itself, couldn't silence the truth that Steinbeck had documented with such painful precision: that ordinary people deserve dignity, that their struggles matter, that systems failing them should be questioned. John Steinbeck, 1902 to 1968. Author, Nobel Laureate, truth-teller, not just bestseller, tracked by the FBI for 40 years, burned in his hometown, banned across America, won the Nobel Prize anyway. Because some truths are more powerful than the forces trying to silence them, and some writers refuse to look away from suffering, no matter the cost. The FBI file is closed now. Steinbeck died in 1968, but The Grapes of Wrath is still being read, still being taught, still forcing readers to see what powerful people want invisible. They burned his book in town squares. Today, it's in every library. That's what happens when you write the truth.